Hey, Mr. Rue with the crazy air here. It's day one of our flipped classroom, so we talked about it. So now you're going to watch the video, take some good notes, so that when you switch into the other group, you have some ammunition to ask questions, as well as do the practice that I've set out for you. So make sure you take some good notes. Pause the video if you need to, but definitely make sure that you're taking advantage of this situation. So let's take a look at what we need to do for today.
I'm Simba.
You're Simba. All right, so we're starting this week with adding and subtracting fractions and making sure that we're building on those foundations that we set the week prior. Definitely, just to reiterate, make sure that you're taking some good notes, ask questions if you need to, and be brave. I guarantee if you have a question that there's someone sitting near you or in the class that's going to have the exact same question, so definitely ask if you have them. Pause the video if you need to. That's the luxury of having this video in front of you, is that you can pause it when you need to take some notes or pause it when you need to work some problems out. So in terms of today, what you're going to be learning is continuing on with these operations with fractions. So the introduction to some math connections for the week requires us to take a look back. So last week we covered a bunch of different fraction operations. So we've gone through multiplying fractions, we've gone through dividing fractions, that's keep, change, flip. Last week we focused primarily on LCM and GCF, and we saw how to find those two things. So this week we're going to take all of those together and sort of finish off this unit into the two operations that we haven't talked about yet, which is addition and subtraction of fractions. So let's take a look at what we need to get into. There's definitely some basics that we need first, but let's get to it. So let's see what we got next. So like I said before, our focus for this week is operations with fractions, which leads to our first important skill, and that's translating mixed numbers to improper fractions. We're going to need that in particular when we start adding and subtracting mixed numbers. So this is definitely one of those foundational skills that we need to set so that you guys are as good as possible before we move forward. So the biggest question here is, what is the difference between a mixed number and improper fraction? You probably already know this, but definitely an improper fraction or a mixed number has that whole number in front followed by the fraction. The improper fraction has a bigger number on the numerator than the denominator. And it's important that we know how to convert these two things into their counterparts. So we're going to go through some examples. Definitely, I know that a lot of you know how to do this already, but just put this in the front of your mind because we're going to need this as we move forward in the unit. All right, so building our foundation for this unit requires a focus on one first essential question, and that's how do we translate mixed numbers to improper fractions. So this is skill number one for today. Make sure you get good at it, and again, ask questions if you have them. So let's start off with making a hypothesis. So in the next slide, what you're going to see is you're going to see a conversion already been done. So let's see if you can figure out what the rule is or remember what the rule is so that we can definitely put this in our math toolkit so that you can keep on going through this unit in a way that makes the most sense, especially since we're going to be using this skill when we're adding or subtracting these mixed numbers. So let's take a look at creating this hypothesis and coming up with a skill here that you're going to use pretty much in a lot of these questions that you're going to see. So let's take a look at the next slide. Out these three examples. My question to you is, if you can pause it here and figure out what they did to go from the mixed numbers to the improper fractions, you definitely know the rule for this change already. So pause here, see if you can figure it out. Did you pause it? Pause it, see if you can figure it out. Cool. All right, so for those of you who actually paused it, the rule is the following. So definitely write down this example here. So the pattern for mixed numbers to improper fractions is the following. So you take the the denominator of the fraction that's in there, you multiply it by the whole number. So in this case, 2 times 2 gives me 4. With that number, I add it to the top, the numerator of the fraction that's attached to my mixed number, and I get a result of 5. So that's how we rewrite these mixed numbers as improper fractions. So definitely write this down in your notes because you can use this example to help you solve multiple problems here. All right, so here are 4 examples. Pause the video here, try these by yourself, and then play the video so that you can see the answers. So pause it now. All right, so hopefully you took a second to work on these. Check your work here. So for number one, all I'm going to do is follow along that same pattern that I found in my first example. So I take that 10, multiply it by that 2 in front, I get 20 as my result, and all I do is add that result to the top to get 27 over 10. Cool. That should be your improper fraction. For number two, I'd follow the exact same pattern. So 4 times 5 gives me 20, plus that 1 on the top gives me 21 over 4 as my improper fraction. Number three, 8 times 8 gives me 64. Add that result to the top gives me 66 over 8. And last but not least, 3 and 4/7. To rewrite that as an improper fraction, you take 3 times 7, which is 21. Add that to the top, which is 25 over 7. So definitely an important skill here, and I know a lot of you already know how to do this, so just make sure that this is in the front of your mind for when we start adding and subtracting these bad boys, so that you know what I'm talking about when I do it a little faster, since you should already know this. So definitely make sure that you copy down these answers, but also understand how I found them. So take a second, write this down, and let's move on. All right, so here comes the real question. Can we go in the other direction? So we know how we go from mixed numbers to improper fractions. How do we go from improper fractions to mixed numbers? And this is definitely an important step, not only for your recipes, but as we move on to prepare for our unit test. So our next skill is being able to see a pattern here. So take a second, pause just like before, and see if you can figure out how I changed those improper fractions to mixed numbers. Cool, pause. All right, so here, boys and girls, is where you gotta make sure you fill in some notes here. So some fill in the blanks is the technique in order to create a mixed number from an improper fraction. So step number one is you figure out the answer to this question. How many times can the denominator, aka the bottom number, divide into the top? So in our example here, we see that 3 goes into 7 2 times. So that's using that long division piece that you learned way back in the day. And figuring out how many times something can go into another evenly. So we write that number down in front. So that whole number is what we get for our mixed number there. Now whatever we get left over, that is the number that we put over for our remainder as the fraction. So just take a second, pause the video here, fill in these notes, and let's take these 3 ideas or these 3 steps and see if we can apply it to some example problems. All right, so here are 3 example problems. Write these down in the boxes in the notes and pause the video here and give them a shot yourself before you actually move on to the answers. So pause the video now. Pause it. Pause it. Cool, pause it. All right, so first example, we have 25 over 6. So we ask ourselves, how many times does 6 go into 25? So the closest that it can go into 25 is 4 times, because I know 6 times 4 gives me 24. So in terms of my whole number that goes in front, I know 4 is that number for my mixed number here. Now in order to figure out what I have left over, all I do is carry out that division. 25 minus that 24 gives me 1 left over, and that's what gets put over that 6. So 4 and a 6 is my mixed number translated from that improper fraction. Next up, I've got 7 over 2, and in our example before, we take that 2 and divide it by that 7. We know that 2 goes into 7 3 times equally, because 2 times 3 gives me 6, with 1 left over. So we take that 3, put it out front, and that leftover piece gets put over my remainder, which is 2. So I have 3.5 for my mixed number. Next one, last one here, I've got 8 over 81. So again, I set up my long division here. So I go 8 over 81, and I figure out what's the closest I can get to 81. So if I think about it, I know that 8 goes into 8 one time, and 0 times into 1. So it goes in at least 10 times. So using our skills of remainders here, I know that my final answer should be 10 1/8. So this is how we rewrite improper fractions as mixed numbers. So again, make sure that you write down these examples because you're going to need them not only in your cookbook, like I said before, but definitely in some practice problems to prepare you for the Unit 2 test. So now that we've got these two skills down and on paper, now is the time when we're actually going to go into our adding and subtracting for fractions. So let's take a look at some examples. This is easiest case scenario, so let's take a look. All right, so here is essential question number 2 for the day, and that's how do we add or subtract fractions with like denominators? Now the key word here is this word like. So it's important that you understand what that means so that you can differentiate between the two types of problems that you could potentially see for adding and subtracting fractions. So let's definitely take a look at these first examples and see how we can use our skills of deduction to imply what like denominators actually mean. So I'm going to start with a picture definition here. So this is definitely something that you got to think about for a second and not just jump to a conclusion. So consider the following picture. I've got two rectangles and they're shaded in a particular way. How could I represent the shaded region as a mixed number or an improper fraction? So take a second, pause the video here, and see if you can come up with your answer. Write it down on your notes. So pause the video here. All right. So our two different answers that you could have potentially written down is 5/3. So how did I figure out 5/3 as my improper fraction? Because I have 5 of those pieces that are shaded in, and I see that they're divided into thirds. Another way that I can think about it is that there's one whole piece shaded in, so one whole rectangle shaded in, plus 2 of those thirds on the second piece. So these are my two answers. My improper fraction and my mixed number are 1 2/3 or 5/3. They both mean the exact same thing. So let's take a look at another example to get our feet wet with this addition. All right, give this one a shot. See if you can write down the mixed number or the improper fraction here. So pause the video here, come up with your answer, and come back for the answer after you come up with yours. So pause the video here. All right, so hopefully you pause the video and you see that the mixed number that I can figure out is actually 2 and 3/6, or 2 and 1/2. So how did I come up with that? I see I have 2 full pieces shaded in and 3 of those 6 pieces on the last rectangle filled in, which boils down and reduces to 1/2. I can also count the individual squares, and what I can see if I count those individual squares is that I get 15/6. So 15/6 would be my improper fraction, and 2 1/2 would be my mixed number. Cool. Let's try this last one on for size to see if you get up, or if you pick up what I'm putting down here. All right, last one. See if you can figure this one out. Give me the mixed number and the improper fraction that this picture represents. Pause the video now. Cool. So the mixed number would be 2 2/4, aka 2 1/2. How did I find that? There's 2 whole circles shaded in and 2 out of the 4 pieces for the last circle filled in. So that's 2 2/4. Counting all the pieces individually, I see that I have a grand total of 10 out of 4 pieces, or 10/4 all filled in, which is my improper fraction. So I've got my improper fraction and mixed number as follows. Hopefully you got all 3 of those answers. Now let's move on to how this applies to addition. So let's take a look at the next slide. Next problem. Wait, what? I bet you're looking at this and you're like, dude, Mr. Uy, we were just looking at pictures. Why are you moving on to actual fractions? So here's the conclusion for today. Realize that these two problems mean the exact same thing. If you were able to do the picture problem, you should definitely be able to do the fraction problem. So the following is something that you need to make sure that you write down in your notes. This is how you add or subtract fractions with like denominators. So notice the denominators in this example problem are exactly the same. That's what like means. Like means that the denominators are exactly the same. So in order to add fractions with like denominators, all that we have to do is add or subtract the numerators according to the problem. So this says 5/7 plus 1/7. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to add the numerators. 5 plus 1 gives me 6. Boom. So there is my addition step. The only thing I have to do next is keep the denominator exactly the same, which is 7. So 5/7 plus 1/7 gives me 6/7. And it's as easy as that. So add the numerators, keep the denominator the same. Pause the video here and fill in your notes as well as work out the example. Definitely an important step for today, and genuinely the easiest case scenario for adding or subtracting fractions. So definitely write this down and make sure that you're able to apply this to the practice. So now you're set to move on to the skills review practice that I gave you before you started the notes. So you can definitely come up and grab it. I should have it on or in the metal basket, the black metal basket by my desk. Now that you're done with your notes, definitely come up and grab that skills review. Now you can use your notes to definitely finish it. But before you do that, definitely make sure that you're switching gears to the project focus as well. After you're done with the skills review, the one thing that I want you to make sure that you do is focus on your cookbook pages. So some elements that your cookbook pages should have is that they should not be any more than 2 pages. So definitely these are the final edits before you turn them in next week. Make sure all of the information is filled in and spell checked. So use spell check to your advantage here. The math portion, of course, should be done. The recipe and how-to. Pictures should be inserted and your colors and font customized to the best of your ability. So pause here and make sure that you understand the vision for your pages and understand that it meets all of these requirements. Next is definitely understanding that you're going to be critiqued this week. So on Friday, there are going to be people in this class that are going to be seeing your recipes. So what does that mean? That means that you should be ready to receive some feedback. So if you don't have a product to show, there's definitely not a lot that a person can say about it. Also, this Wednesday, Webbies are going to be coming in to critique your work as well. So that means you should be prepared as possible to make sure that you've got something to show them. That brings to the last portion. Now it's individual work time for you until we switch to our next rotation. So definitely these are the things that you can work on. So number 1, the lesson practice, the like denominators, mixed numbers, and visual fractions. That practice is available up on my desk. The second thing, research, completing your Unit 2 digital portfolio for sure is something that you can work on as well. The UI task, that is something you're going to dedicate your time to that rotation once we switch groups. And last but not least, that creativity task, continuing to work on your cookbook pages to the best of your ability. So use your time wisely now. Hopefully we should be around the time where we're going to switch, so you have a chance to ask questions. But other than that, make sure you're running through this list to work on what you need to work on. And thank you for listening. So come with your questions. Make sure that you ask them when you have a chance, and you can come in anytime to ask as well. So hopefully this little video helped you through today's lesson and you're able to carry out your skills practice and your skills review with as little problem as possible. So definitely try your best, and thank you for your work. So I will see you in a little bit. If not, I'm definitely probably standing somewhere in the room. So once you're done, give me a thumbs up, and that tells me that you finished with the video. So good job, guys. Thank you for your participation. You guys are awesome. So see you later. Peace.